On the humid night of July 3rd, 2012, a guest house owner in Shantou, China, made a discovery that would haunt the city for years. While cleaning a vacated room, she found a heavy duffel bag left behind by a nervous guest. Inside was not clothing, but the severed head of a young woman. What began as a gruesome murder investigation soon unraveled the dark reality of a serial predator hunting for victims online. Please subscribe to our channel as we uncover the disturbing truth behind this nightmare. It was just past 10 p.m. on July 3rd, 2012. The streets of Longhu District in Shantou City were beginning to quiet down. This area, sitting on the edge of the urban sprawl, served as a transition zone between the frantic energy of the city center and the slower, quieter pace of the surrounding countryside. While most residents had already locked their doors for the night, a few businesses remained open, casting long shadows under the streetlights. Among them, the red neon sign of the Chenglong Guesthouse flickered against the darkness. The Chenglong Guesthouse was a small, modest establishment, the kind of place that catered to travelers passing through who needed a cheap bed and asked few questions. It was a place of transience, where lives intersected briefly before moving on. But on this particular night, the intersection of lives would leave a permanent, bloody mark. On the staircase leading to the third floor, the landlady, Wang Xiaoyan, was busy with her nightly routine. She was scrubbing the steps, trying to remove the scuff marks left by the day's foot traffic. As she worked her way up, her eyes caught something unusual on the tiled floor. There were spots dark, crimson droplets scattered across the landing. At first, Wang Xiaoyan blinked, assuming her tired eyes were playing tricks on her in the dim light. She rubbed her eyes and leaned in closer. The metallic scent hit her before the realization did. It was blood. Fresh, wet blood. Her heart began to hammer against her ribs. She stood up, her mind racing. Where had this come from? She scanned the hallway and realized that only 2 minutes prior, a male guest had hurried past her, dragging a heavy suitcase. He had moved with a strange, frantic energy, his head ducked low as if trying to avoid being seen. He was the only person who had come down those stairs recently. Driven by a mix of confusion and suspicion, Wang Xiaoyan ran down the stairs and out into the street, hoping to catch the man before he disappeared. She spotted him near his motorcycle, struggling to secure the luggage. When he saw the landlady approaching, his eyes widened in what looked like sheer panic. Before she could accuse him of anything, the man blurted out an explanation. He claimed he had accidentally cut his finger while packing and had dripped blood on the floor in his haste. He apologized profusely, claiming he was in a rush and did not have time to clean it up. Before Wang Xiaoyan could ask to see the wound or question him further, the man kick-started his motorcycle and sped off, vanishing into the night. Wang Xiaoyan stood on the curb, unsettled. The man's voice had trembled. He wasn't just in a rush, he was terrified. She turned back to the guest house, a knot forming in her stomach. She found her husband inside and asked which room the man had just checked out of. "Room 306, her husband replied. Not looking up from his work, Wang Xiaoyan could not shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Why was the man fleeing in the middle of the night? What was in that heavy suitcase that he had dragged with such difficulty? And was a cut finger really the source of that much blood? She decided she had to see the room for herself. She climbed back up to the third floor and unlocked the door to room 306. It was a tiny single room, barely 160 square feet. As soon as she pushed the door open, she was hit by a wall of chemical fumes. The air was thick with the stinging scent of bleach and disinfectant. Wang Xiaoyan stepped inside, looking around. The room was bizarrely tidy. The bed was made with military precision, the sheets smoothed down flat. The furniture was perfectly aligned. It looked as if no one had stayed there at all. This was highly abnormal. Most guests at this price point left their rooms in disarray, with unmade beds and trash in the bins. But this guest had cleaned, He had scrubbed the room down with an intensity that suggested he was trying to erase his existence. The extreme cleanliness was more disturbing than a messy room would have been. If he had cut his finger, why clean the entire room but leave blood on the hallway floor? It did not add up. Wang Xiaoyan moved deeper into the room, her eyes scanning for anything out of place. She walked toward the bathroom. Lying on the floor, near the doorway, was a large travel bag. It was partially unzipped. Her curiosity overcame her dread. She reached down and pulled the zipper further open. Seconds later, down in the lobby, her husband heard a scream that made his blood run cold. It was a shriek of pure, primal terror. He abandoned the front desk and sprinted up the stairs, taking them two at a time. When he reached room 306, he found his wife slumped in the bathroom doorway, clutching her head, her body shaking violently. He followed her gaze to the open bag on the floor. Inside, nestled among the fabric, was a human head. It was face down, matted with long black hair. Panic erupted. The couple did not dare touch the bag again. They scrambled out of the room, locking the door behind them, and immediately dialed the emergency number for the police. Within minutes, the flashing lights of patrol cars illuminated the street outside the Chenglong Guesthouse. Officers cordoned off the building, establishing a crime scene. Despite the late hour, the commotion drew a crowd. Guests from other rooms and owners of nearby night stalls gathered at the perimeter, whispering and craning their necks to see what was happening. Forensic investigators arrived, donning protective suits. The lighting in the bathroom was poor, so they set up portable floodlights and used high-powered flashlights to examine the contents of the bag. With clinical precision, an officer reached into the bag and carefully turned the head over. The face that was revealed was pale, draining of all color. The lips were a bruised purple. The eyes were half open, staring vacantly at the ceiling. Blood was still oozing from the severed neck, soaking the bottom of the travel bag. But the head was not the only thing in the bag. As investigators probed further, they found more human remains. 2 severed arms, 2 lower legs, parts of thighs. The body had been dismantled with horrifying efficiency. The sight was enough to make even the seasoned officers recoil. The forensic team began to process the bathroom. Although the killer had cleaned, the use of luminol and careful inspection revealed blood splatter in the grout lines of the tiles and in the corners of the walls. The bathroom was confirmed as the primary crime scene, the abattoir where the dismemberment had taken place. Based on the initial examination of the remains, the medical examiner provided a preliminary profile. The victim was a female, likely between 25 and 30 years old. She stood approximately 5 feet 3 inches tall and had long black hair. The state of the remains suggested she had been dead for less than 24 hours. A crucial piece of evidence was found around the victim's neck, a red cord pulled tight. This suggested that the cause of death was likely mechanical asphyxiation, strangulation. The dismemberment had happened post-mortem. The investigators moved to the bedroom area. They dusted every surface for fingerprints. On the mattress, they found a partial palm print and a few fingerprints that appeared to belong to an adult male. However, the prints were smudged and incomplete, making an immediate match in the database impossible. The room itself had been stripped of personal effects. There was no wallet, no ID card, and no purse belonging to the victim. The killer had been thorough. The meticulous cleaning and the calm demeanor the landlady described suggested a perpetrator with a high degree of psychological stability. He had not panicked after the killing. He had taken his time to clean, to pack, and to organize the scene. The police profilers noted that the dismemberment was done with a certain level of skill. The cuts were clean, targeting the joints. This led them to theorize that the killer might have experience in butchery, or perhaps a background in anatomy or medicine. Alternatively, they were dealing with a serial offender who had practiced this gruesome ritual before. Recognizing the severity of the case, the Shantou police formed a special task force overnight. Their first priority was to identify the man who had rented room 306. The guest registry showed that the room had been rented by a man named Zuo Guoping. According to the ID used at check-in, Zuo Guoping was 30 years old. The landlady described him as about 5 feet 7 inches tall, with a receding hairline that made him look effectively bald. The police immediately pulled the CCTV footage from the guest house lobby. They wanted to see when the victim had arrived, but they hit a frustrating dead end. Between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. that afternoon, the guest house had suffered a power outage due to grid maintenance in the district. The cameras had been offline during the exact window when the victim likely entered the building. There was no footage of a woman entering room 306. Undeterred, the detectives expanded their search to the surveillance cameras on the surrounding streets. They scanned hours of footage from the afternoon of July 3rd. Finally, they found a breakthrough. At approximately 4 p.m., cameras captured the suspect, the bald man identified as Zuo Guoping, walking out of the guest house. He was on his phone, looking animated. He walked to a nearby intersection and waited. Moments later, a woman appeared. She was young, with long flowing hair, wearing a distinct red dress. The footage showed them greeting each other warmly. They stood close, their body language intimate and familiar. They looked like a couple meeting for a date. After a brief conversation, they walked back toward the guest house together. This was the victim. A witness in room 307, directly adjacent to the crime scene, provided another chilling detail. He told police that late in the afternoon, he had heard a woman scream from the room next door. It was a sharp, sudden sound. However, the guest house was old and not soundproof. Noises were common. The neighbor assumed the woman had seen a cockroach or a rat, common pests in the area, and thought nothing more of it. He had gone back to watching television, unaware that a murder was taking place just feet away from him through the thin wall. Back in room 306, investigators found a few items in the trash bin that the killer had missed during his cleanup. There was a black plastic bag containing some cheap cosmetics. The brand and quality suggested the victim was likely a factory worker or someone with a modest income. More importantly, they found a bag of dried plums, a popular sour snack. The bag was half-eaten. On the packaging was a stamp indicating quality control from the Food Bureau of Zhongshan City. This was a specific regional clue. It suggested the victim had traveled from Zhongshan, a city several hours away, to come to Shantou. By 5 p.m., the power at the guest house had been restored. The lobby camera captured Zuo Guoping leaving room 306 alone later that night, wearing a white shirt and carrying a black bag, likely containing other body parts that were not found at the scene. The police now had a clear theory. The suspect, using the name Zuo Guoping, was the killer. The woman in the red dress was the victim. Using the timeline established by the street cameras, the police traced the woman's movements prior to meeting the killer. They found footage of her getting out of a taxi near the meeting point. They tracked down the taxi driver, who remembered her. He confirmed he had picked her up from the long-distance bus station. The investigation shifted to the bus station. Officers combed through the passenger manifests and surveillance video from buses arriving from Zhongshan. They spotted the woman in the red dress buying a ticket and boarding a bus in Zhongshan earlier that day. Through ticket records, they finally put a name to the face: Zhang Xiaoyi, 31 years old. The Shantou police immediately contacted their counterparts in Zhongshan. They needed to locate Zhang Xiaoyi's family to confirm the identity. The local police tracked down her husband, a man named Song Wei. When the police contacted Song Wei, he sounded exhausted and worried. He told officers that he had been unable to reach his wife for days. Her phone was turned off, which was completely out of character for her. He and his relatives had been searching the local area, but had found no trace of her. Song Wei traveled to Shantou to assist with the identification. The police took DNA samples from him and the couple's children to compare with the remains found in the guest house. The results were a match. The head in the bag belonged to Zhang Xiaoyi, a 31-year-old mother from Shanxi province who had moved south for work. Song Wei was devastated. He told the police that he and Zhang Xiaoyi had been married for 10 years and had 2 children together. He worked at a factory in Zhongshan, while she worked at a hair salon and massage parlor near their home. He described her as a gentle, quiet woman who never got into conflicts with anyone. Her social circle is very small, Song Wei insisted to the detectives. She only hangs out with a few friends from middle school. After work, she walks straight home. She doesn't like traveling. She gets carsick easily. She would never go to a strange city like Shantou alone. Song Wei was baffled. He had no family in Shantou. He had never heard his wife mention any friends there. Why would she travel hundreds of miles to meet a bald man named Zuo Guoping? Was she having an affair? Song Wei refused to believe it, but the evidence of her meeting the man was undeniable. To get a clearer picture of the victim's life, the police went to her workplace, the hair salon in Zhongshan, and interviewed her coworkers. The story they heard there was drastically different from the husband's version. A colleague named Zhen Zhen spoke up. Her marriage wasn't happy, Zhen Zhen told the police. She and Song Wei fought all the time about money and small things. She felt he was insensitive. Sometimes she would work late, and he wouldn't even call to check on her. She was lonely. Zhen Zhen dropped a bombshell. Zhang Xiaoyi and her husband were effectively separated, though still living under the same roof. And Zhang Xiaoyi was not just lonely. She was looking for a way out. She met a man online, Zhen Zhen revealed. About a month ago, he told her he was a businessman in Shantou. He owns a building materials store. He sent her photos. He was handsome, rich, and very charming. Not like that bald man you showed me. Zhen Zhen explained that the man had invited Zhang Xiaoyi to Shantou for a visit, framing it as their first romantic meeting. Zhang Xiaoyi had been thrilled. She saw this as her chance at a better life, a romance with a wealthy man who appreciated her. On July 3rd, she had dressed up, put on her best red dress, and left with a heart full of hope. The police showed Zhen Zhen the photo of the suspect, Zuo Guoping. She shook her head vigorously. No, that's not him. The man she showed me on her phone was younger. He had hair. He was good looking. This man looks nothing like him. This discrepancy was the key. The victim thought she was meeting a handsome, wealthy businessman. Instead, she was met by Zuo Guoping, an older, balding man. Yet, the CCTV showed her greeting him warmly. Had she been catfished and accepted it? Or was Zuo Guoping merely an associate of the businessman? The police broadcast the image of Zuo Guoping and the details of the crime across the region, hoping for leads. The brutality of the dismemberment struck a chord with law enforcement in neighboring cities. Soon, the phone rang at the Shantou police headquarters. It was the police from Jieyang City, a neighboring jurisdiction. "We have a cold case here," the Jieyang officer said. "A female body found recently, headless, dismembered. We never found the killer. The MO is nearly identical." The detectives realized they were not just dealing with a murder of passion. They were hunting a serial killer who was active across multiple cities. The businessman and Zuo Guoping were likely the same phantom, luring women to their deaths. The investigation merged into a joint task force. They began digging into Zhang Xiaoyi's phone records. They found she had frequent calls with an unregistered number, a ghost number, leading up to her death. On the afternoon of July 3rd, she had spoken to this number for a long time. The timestamp matched the moment Zuo Guoping was seen on camera talking on his phone while leaving the guest house. The police tried to trace the owner of the number, but in 2012, SIM cards could still be bought without identification in China. The number was a dead end. They canvassed the city, showing Zuo Guoping's photo to over 10,000 residents. No one recognized him. The name Zuo Guoping was almost certainly an alias, and the ID card used at the guest house was likely a forgery. Just as the trail seemed to be going cold, on July 7th, 4 days after the murder, a tip came in. A resident in a rural village on the outskirts of Jieyang reported seeing a man who looked like the suspect. "We call him Fendo," the tipster said. It means struggle or strive. He's a migrant worker. The police moved in. The man's real name was Zhang Yangfu. He was 42 years old, from Guizhou province. He was currently living in a rental house in the chaos of the Jieyang Economic Development Zone. Zhang Yangfu was unemployed, having been fired from a printing factory for laziness. He was currently making ends meet as an illegal motorcycle taxi driver. When the police knocked on his door, Zhang Yangfu opened it, looking completely unbothered. He played the part of the confused innocent perfectly. "Shantou?" he asked, scratching his head. "I've never been to Shantou. Why are you asking me about a murder?" He denied everything. He denied knowing Zhang Xiaoyi. He denied being Zuo Guoping. The police played their ace. They showed him the CCTV footage from the Chenglong Guesthouse. The bald head, the gait, the profile, it was undeniable. Zhang Yangfu stared at the screen. Then, incredibly, he laughed. "That's not me," he said calmly. "Look at that man. He's wearing a nice shirt. He looks clean. Look at me. I'm a motorcycle taxi driver. I don't own clothes like that. You have the wrong guy." His confidence was unnerving. He was betting on the graininess of the video and the lack of direct physical evidence on his person. But the police had one more card to play. They brought in Wang Xiaoyan, the landlady who had looked the killer in the eye on the staircase. She took one look at Zhang Yangfu and nodded. "That's him. I will never forget that bald head or those eyes." To seal the deal, the forensic team compared Zhang Yangfu's fingerprints to the bloody, partial print found on the mattress in room 306. It was a perfect match. Faced with the irrefutable science, the innocent act vanished. Zhang Yangfu's posture changed. The confusion left his face, replaced by a cold, hard sneer. He confessed. "I am Zuo Guoping," he admitted. "And yes, I killed her." With the forensic evidence mounted against him, the facade of the confused motorcycle taxi driver crumbled completely. Zhang Yangfu, the man who had played the role of a humble, struggling laborer just moments before, underwent a chilling transformation right in front of the interrogators. He slumped back in his chair, his expression shifting from feigned innocence to a look of arrogant, almost serene satisfaction. He began to speak, not with the stammering fear of a caught criminal, but with the steady, lecturing tone of a man who believed he was the only righteous person in the room. He admitted to everything. He confirmed that he was indeed the man known as Zuo Guoping. The name was a fabrication, supported by high-quality counterfeit identity cards he had purchased on the black market to move through the city like a ghost. He explained that his original plan had been simple. He wanted to defraud women. He sought to lure them in, extract money from them, and manipulate them into sexual relationships. It was a predatory scheme, but one that initially seemed motivated by greed and lust. However, as Zhang Yangfu continued his confession, the detectives realized they were staring into a much darker abyss than simple fraud. Zhang Yangfu claimed that his motive had evolved. He told the police that after meeting several of these women, he had come to a realization. In his twisted worldview, his victims were not innocent. He described them with vitriol, calling them disgraceful and immoral. He pointed out that many of the women he targeted, including Zhang Xiaoyi, were already married, despite having husbands and families. They were eager to meet a stranger from the internet, simply because he promised them wealth and excitement. They were willing to abandon their vows and their children for the prospect of a rich lover. To Zhang Yangfu, this made them deserving of judgment. "I wanted to show them that sincere emotion is the most precious thing in life," he preached to the disgusted officers. "Life should not always be about money. Those who betray their families for novelty and cash are rotten." In a display of breathtaking narcissism, Zhang Yangfu framed his brutal acts of murder and dismemberment as a public service. He truly viewed himself as an ambassador of justice, a moral cleanser sent to purge society of unfaithful, gold-digging women. He did not see himself as a monster. He saw himself as a necessary evil, a tragic hero correcting the moral failures of the modern world. But monsters are not born, they are made. To understand how a man transforms into a butcher who believes he is a saint, the detectives had to peel back the layers of Zheng Yangfu's past. They needed to find the trigger that had turned a laborer from the mountains into a serial predator. The police investigation traced Zheng Yangfu's origins back to the remote mountainous province of Guizhou. Born into a poor family with 4 brothers, Zheng Yangfu grew up in a harsh environment where survival was a daily struggle. The poverty of his childhood forced him to drop out of school early and leave home to find work. He drifted through various cities, taking on menial jobs, hauling heavy loads, and working in factories, always scraping by on the margins of China's booming economy. Despite his low status, there was a time when Zheng Yangfu was a man capable of love and even heroism. The investigators learned about his first marriage to a woman named Wang Yi. Their meeting played out like a scene from a romantic drama. Years earlier, while working as a porter in a busy market, Zheng Yangfu had witnessed a robbery. A thief had snatched a woman's purse and sprinted through the crowd. While other bystanders watched or looked away, Zheng Yangfu did not hesitate. He threw down the heavy sack of goods he was carrying and chased the thief through the winding alleys. He tackled the criminal, retrieved the stolen bag, and returned it to its owner. That owner was Wang Yi. She was 5 years younger than him, with a gentle face and a sweet demeanor. She was immediately taken with the rugged, brave young man who had come to her rescue. In the village, Wang Yi was considered a beauty, and she had attracted the attention of several wealthier suitors, men with stable jobs and better prospects. But Wang Yi, moved by Zheng Yangfu's courage and what she perceived as his noble character, rejected the rich suitors. She chose the poor porter. They fell in love and eventually married. For a brief period, Zheng Yangfu felt like a king. He had won the heart of the most beautiful girl in the village, purely on the merit of his character, proving to himself that love could conquer poverty. But the fairy tale did not survive the harsh reality of their economic situation. After the wedding, the crushing weight of their poverty began to erode their happiness. Wang Yi, who had grown up with dreams of a comfortable life, quickly grew tired of counting every penny. The romance of the hero porter faded when faced with the daily grind of survival. Zheng Yangfu began to notice a change in his wife. She became distant, critical, and unhappy. Then, the inevitable happened. She met another man. This new suitor was much older than her, lacking the youth and vigor of Zheng Yangfu. But he possessed the one thing Zheng Yangfu did not: money. He was wealthy, stable, and willing to spoil her. Wang Yi did not hesitate long. She abandoned Zheng Yangfu, leaving him to raise their child alone while she ran off with the rich, older man. This betrayal broke something fundamental inside Zheng Yangfu. He was left humiliated, a single father struggling to feed his child and his aging parents, while the woman he had saved and loved lived in luxury with a man she presumably did not love. The seed of hatred was planted. He began to believe that women were inherently transactional creatures who would always choose currency over character. Desperate to support his son, Zheng Yangfu left his hometown again, entrusting the child to his elderly parents. He worked harder, became more bitter, and eventually entered a second serious relationship. He met a woman named Mai. By this time, Zheng Yangfu was older and more cynical, yet he still held out hope that he could find a loyal partner. He fell deeply in love with Mai, convincing himself that she was different from his ex-wife. He projected all his desires for a traditional, faithful wife onto her. After dating for some time, Zheng Yangfu proposed. He wanted to marry her, to rebuild the family life that had been stolen from him. Mai agreed to the proposal, but with one non-negotiable condition. Zheng Yangfu had to build a house. In many parts of China, owning a home is a prerequisite for marriage, a symbol of stability and ability to provide. But for a migrant worker like Zheng Yangfu, who lived in cheap rentals and sent every spare yuan back to his parents and son, buying land and building a house was an impossible dream. He tried to reason with her. He laid out his finances, explained his burdens, and pleaded for her understanding. He promised to work hard, to save, to build a future together gradually. Mai's response was cold and devastating. She looked him in the eye and told him flatly that without a house, there would be no wedding. She was not willing to struggle with him. She essentially told him that his love was worthless without the bricks and mortar to house it. The rejection from Mai was the final catalyst. The first betrayal by Wang Yi had created the wound. The rejection by Mai poured salt into it and let it fester into a gangrenous hatred. Zhang Yangfu concluded that all women were the same, greedy, heartless, and manipulative. He decided that if the world was going to treat him like a loser because he was poor, he would rewrite the rules of the game. He could not change his bank account, but he could change his identity. Zhang Yangfu turned to the internet. He saw the digital world as a hunting ground where he could be anyone he wanted. He realized that the women who had rejected him were looking for a specific archetype: the successful businessman, the boss, the provider. So he became that man. He created a detailed, fraudulent persona on social media. He stole photos of luxury cars, expensive watches, and high-end banquets. He filled his profile with fabricated stories about his business trips and his private enterprise. He cast himself as a wealthy, self-made entrepreneur who was tragically single and looking for true love. The trap worked with terrifying efficiency. Almost immediately, his inbox was flooded with messages. Young women, divorced women, and married women, all drawn to the illusion of wealth, began to flirt with him. For Zhang Yangfu, this was addictive. It validated his cynical worldview. He wasn't happy that he was popular. He was satisfied that he had proven his theory correct. These women didn't want him. They wanted his money. And because they were so easily fooled by his lies, he felt superior to them. He felt justified in manipulating them. Among the hundreds of women he chatted with, one stood out: Zhang Xiaoyi. Zhang Xiaoyi was the perfect target for a predator like Zhang Yangfu. Outwardly, she was a quiet, dutiful wife and mother. But internally, she was simmering with resentment. She worked long hours at a massage parlor, a job that was physically demanding and socially stigmatized. Her husband, Song Wei, was a factory worker with a meager income. Zhang Xiaoyi looked at her life and felt cheated. She saw other women with nice clothes and easy lives, and she blamed her husband for her hardships. She despised his lack of ambition and his inability to provide the lifestyle she felt she deserved. Their home had become a battlefield of petty arguments and cold silences. When her husband failed to check on her or show affection, she interpreted it not as fatigue, but as neglect. She wanted an escape, and then, on her computer screen, she found Zhang Yangfu, or rather, the fictional tycoon he pretended to be. He was charming, attentive, and seemingly loaded with cash. He listened to her complaints about her husband and offered sympathy. He painted a picture of a life where she would be pampered and appreciated. For a woman feeling trapped in a loveless, poverty-stricken marriage, he was a lifeline. Zhang Xiaoyi swallowed the bait whole. She did not know that the businessman on the other end of the chat was actually an unemployed motorcycle taxi driver living in a squalid rental room, seething with hatred for women exactly like her. After weeks of intense online courtship, Zhang Yangfu made his move. He invited her to Shantou on July 3rd. He told her he wanted to meet her in person and give her a special gift to celebrate their connection. Zhang Xiaoyi's imagination ran wild. She assumed the gift from a wealthy CEO would be expensive jewelry, perhaps, or a stack of cash. Greed and romantic fantasy blinded her to the obvious dangers. She told her colleague Zhen Zhen about the trip with the excitement of a teenager, boasting about her luck in finding a rich boyfriend. On the morning of July 3rd, Zhang Xiaoyi packed her bag. She put on her favorite red dress, applied her makeup carefully, and boarded the long-distance bus from Zhongshan to Shantou. She believed she was riding toward a new life. In reality, she was commuting to her execution. She arrived in Shantou in the afternoon and took a taxi to the meeting point, the Chenglong Guesthouse in the Longhu district. When she finally met Zhang Yangfu on the street corner, there was a moment of jarring reality. The man standing there was balding, older than his photos, and dressed plainly. He did not look like the sleek tycoon from the internet. However, Zhang Yangfu was a master manipulator. He likely spun a quick lie. Perhaps he was dressing down to avoid attention, or the photos were old. Whatever he said, it worked. The CCTV footage showed Zhang Xiaoyi smiling and walking close to him. She had already invested so much hope in this affair that she was willing to overlook the cracks in the facade. They walked into the Chenglong Guesthouse together. Because of the power outage, they slipped past the electronic eyes of the lobby cameras unseen and ascended the stairs to room 306. Once inside the small room, the dynamic shifted. Zhang Yangfu offered her some dried plums. He had bought a small gesture to lower her guard. They sat on the bed, talking. According to Zhang Yangfu's confession, they engaged in sexual intercourse. But the intimacy was a prelude to violence. Zhang Yangfu claimed that initially he only planned to teach her a lesson to use her for sex, maybe rob her, and leave her stranded to humiliate her. But something changed in the room. He claimed that during their interaction, Zhang Xiaoyi began to scream. Perhaps she realized the deception was deeper than just his appearance. Perhaps she saw the knife he had hidden. When she screamed, the Justice Ambassador vanished, replaced by a desperate, violent criminal. Zhang Yangfu clamped his hand over her mouth to stifle the noise. He knew that if she alerted the guest house staff, his charade would be over. He would go to prison for rape or fraud. In that moment of panic and rage, he made the final decision. He grabbed a red nylon rope he had packed in his suitcase, a detail that proved premeditation. Contradicting his claim of a spur-of-the-moment panic, he wrapped the cord around her neck. He pulled tight. Zhang Xiaoyi, the woman who had traveled hundreds of miles for a dream of romance, struggled for her life in a cheap hotel room. But she was no match for the strength of the laborer. Zhang Yangfu choked the life out of her until she went limp. She was dead. But for Zhang Yangfu, the work was just beginning. He looked at the body of the woman in the red dress and felt no remorse, only the pragmatic need to dispose of the evidence. He dragged her corpse into the cramped bathroom. He opened his suitcase and took out the tools he had brought for this exact purpose, a sharp knife and heavy-duty bags. With the cold detachment of a butcher, he began to dismantle her. He severed her head first, then her arms and legs. He worked quickly, ensuring the blood flowed into the drain. He packed the head and the larger limbs into his travel bag. The smaller pieces and the bloody clothes were stuffed into black plastic trash bags. He spent hours scrubbing the room. He wiped the floor, arranged the bed sheets, and aligned the furniture, trying to reset the room to a perfect, undisturbed state. He wanted to leave no trace that a woman had ever been there. Late that night, he prepared to leave. He slung the heavy travel bag over his shoulder, the bag containing Zhang Xiaoyi's head, and walked out the door. But fate intervened in the form of the landlady, Wang Xiaoyan. As Zhang Yangfu descended the stairs, the bag leaked. Blood dripped onto the pristine stairs he was walking down. When Wang Xiaoyan confronted him about the red spots, panic seized him. He realized he couldn't walk out onto the street with a leaking bag of body parts while the landlady was watching him. He made a split-second calculation. He ran out to his motorcycle, revved the engine, and fled, leaving the main bag behind in the room. He managed to escape with only the smaller black bags, which he later dumped in a river. He thought he had gotten away with it. He returned to his life in Jieyang, driving his motorcycle taxi, thinking the police would never connect the businessman Zhuo Guoping to the loser Zhang Yangfu. But he was wrong. The arrest of Zhang Yangfu did more than just solve the gruesome mystery in room 306. It pulled back the curtain on a much larger and more terrifying landscape of predatory violence. As the detectives in Shantou began to dig into the digital life of the man who called himself Struggle, they realized that Zhang Xiaoyi was not just an isolated victim of a crime of passion or a scam gone wrong. She was a single entry in a digital ledger of death. When the police searched Zhang Yangfu's cramped rental house in the industrial outskirts of Jieyang, they found evidence that suggested he had been living a double life for a very long time. Inside the squalid room, investigators discovered a laptop computer, 2 mobile phones, and 2 women's wristwatches that clearly did not belong to a middle-aged bachelor. More disturbing was the contents of his wardrobe. Alongside his own weathered work clothes were several sets of women's clothing in varying sizes. There were dresses, blouses, and even intimate items, all folded neatly. These were trophies, taken from women who had vanished into the shadow of his false identity. The technical team gained access to Zhang Yangfu's social media accounts and were stunned by the scale of his operation. He did not just have one profile. He had 8 distinct personas across multiple platforms. Each one was carefully crafted to project wealth and status, featuring photos of luxury apartments and high-end dining. Across these 8 accounts, he was simultaneously actively messaging over 3,000 women. The logs showed a consistent pattern. He would target women who appeared vulnerable or dissatisfied with their marriages, shower them with attention, and then propose an in-person meeting at a location he controlled. If the police had not caught him when they did, the death toll would have undoubtedly continued to rise. The message logs were filled with hundreds of women who had already agreed to meet him in various cities across the region. The realization that they were dealing with a prolific serial offender sent a chill through the task force. Following the public announcement of his arrest, 3 different women came forward, terrified and trembling. They confessed that they had been lured by his businessman persona only to be physically assaulted and robbed. They had kept silent until now, paralyzed by the fear of retaliation and the crushing social stigma of admitting they had been seeking an extramarital affair. However, the investigation was about to take an even darker turn. As the Shantou and Jieyang police cross-referenced their missing persons databases, a name surfaced that linked Zhang Yangfu to another unsolved tragedy. On June 12, 2012, just weeks before the murder at the guest house, a woman named Huang Fen had been reported missing from Jiangmen City in Guangdong Province. Huang Feng was an ambitious woman who had told her family she was traveling to Shantou to interview for a high-paying job. She had mentioned that a successful friend she met online had offered her a position as a manager in his store. Initially, Zhang Yangfu denied any knowledge of Huang Feng. He sat in the interrogation room, his bald head gleaming under the fluorescent lights, maintaining a stoic silence. But the detectives were patient. They showed him the evidence found in his home, including items that matched Huang Feng's personal belongings. Eventually, his resolve flickered. He admitted that he had lured her under the guise of an employment opportunity. He told the officers that his initial intent was simply to assault and rob her. But according to his confession, when Huang Feng arrived and saw the reality of who he was, a poor laborer, instead of a wealthy businessman, she became hysterical. She was rightfully angry and began to berate him, threatening to call the police and expose his fraud. The shift from his fantasy world to the harsh light of reality triggered something violent in Zhang Yangfu. He could not allow his illusion to be shattered. He told the investigators that they got into a heated physical altercation, which ended when he wrapped his hands around her throat and squeezed until she stopped breathing. He then disposed of her body, though his directions were vague and intentionally misleading. The investigators were now certain they were dealing with a killer who had refined his methods through repetition. This led them back to the headless body found in Jieyang, the case that had originally piqued the interest of the neighboring police force. This victim had been found dumped in a river, her remains showing the same surgical precision and dismemberment as Zhang Xiaoyi. Zhang Yangfu, however, refused to talk about the Jiaying victim. He seemed to take a twisted pride in withholding information, playing one last game of control with the authorities. The task force realized that to break a man like Zhang Yangfu, they needed to target the only thing he still seemed to value: his family. They decided to send a team to his ancestral home in the rural mountains of Guizhou. The journey was long, taking the officers deep into the countryside, where the roads turned to dirt and the houses were built from weathered wood and stone. They found his parents living in extreme poverty, their faces etched with the lines of decades of hard labor. They were simple, honest people who had spent their entire lives trying to provide a better future for their 4 sons. When the police explained the nature of the crimes their son had committed, the elderly couple collapsed in grief. They could not reconcile the image of the boy they had raised with the monster described by the officers. They agreed to record a plea, begging their son to tell the truth and seek some form of redemption before it was too late. The detectives returned to the interrogation room and played the recording. Hearing the wavering, heartbroken voices of his parents finally shattered Zhang Yangfu's cold exterior. The ambassador of justice was gone, replaced by a man who realized he had utterly destroyed the honor of the family he claimed to be working for. Through tears, he began to provide the final piece of the puzzle. The headless victim in Jiaying was a woman named Mai. She was the very woman he had once hoped to marry, the one who had demanded he build a house as a condition for their wedding. Zhang Yangfu explained that after she rejected him, his resentment had boiled over into a murderous rage. He had invited her to his rental home, hoping for one last chance to convince her. When she refused him again, mocking his poverty and his inability to provide, he snapped. He strangled her in the same room where he slept every night. He described the process of dismembering her with a horrifying lack of emotion. He had used a common kitchen knife, taking his time to ensure the body was in small enough pieces to transport without drawing attention. He had thrown her remains into a nearby river, believing the water would carry his secrets away forever. He told the police that after Mai was dead, he felt a strange sense of relief, as if he had finally balanced a cosmic scale. This was the moment his justice mission truly began. Every victim after Mai was merely a surrogate for the woman who had first told him he wasn't good enough. With the confession complete, the legal machinery began to turn. Zhang Yangfu was charged with multiple counts of first-degree murder, robbery, and assault. The case captivated and horrified the public. It served as a grim cautionary tale about the dangers of the early internet era, where anonymity allowed predators to manufacture entire lives out of thin air. On March 21, 2014, the Intermediate People's Court of Shantou convened for the final sentencing. The courtroom was packed with the families of his victims, including Song Wei, the husband of Zhang Xiaoyi, who sat in stunned silence as the details of his wife's final moments were read aloud. The judge described Zhang Yangfu's crimes as exceptionally cruel, and noted that his lack of genuine remorse and his delusional justification for the murders made him a permanent danger to society. The court found that Zhang Yangfu had acted with extreme premeditation, purchasing tools and renting rooms specifically for the purpose of killing. His justice argument was dismissed as the incoherent ramblings of a narcissist. For the murders of Zhang Xiaoyi, Huang Feng, and Mai, as well as the numerous assaults on other women, Zhang Yangfu was sentenced to death. The execution was carried out shortly thereafter. With his death, the reign of the man who hunted in red dresses finally came to an end, but the scars he left behind remained. For the families in Zhongshan, Jiangmen, and Jiaying, the closure was bittersweet. They had justice, but they were left with the haunting knowledge of how easily their loved ones had been lured into the dark. The case of the guest house butcher remains one of the most chilling examples of criminal psychology in modern history. It serves as a reminder that behind the glowing screens and polished profiles of the digital world, there can sometimes lurk a very ancient and very real kind of evil. It highlights the importance of caution and the need for skepticism in an age where we often trust strangers more than we should. The case of Zheng Yangfu is a harrowing reminder that the digital world can often mask a terrifying reality. His delusions of being an ambassador of justice were nothing more than a thin veil for his own bitterness and predatory nature. If you found this deep dive into criminal psychology insightful, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more investigations into the world's most disturbing cases. We want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think the guest house landlady's intuition was the only thing that stopped a much longer killing spree? Or was Zheng Yangfu's downfall inevitable?